بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We hope inshallah ta'ala everyone is doing well tonight and of course staying warm and staying healthy as well inshallah ta'ala. We have our series, the class that we're doing, which is called Ar Rahman, which is the description of a group of people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the Quran. Tonight we'll keep it short inshallah ta'ala. I think we only have about 10 slides from what it says. Obviously the first one is this one, so we're already done with the first slide. Inshallah ta'ala we won't go more than about 45 minutes, so we give time for people to go home and whatnot, and of course stay warm because I know the masjid isn't that warm right now. We had the doors open after they did the shampoo, so I apologize for that. We're on the verse, this is in Surah Al-Furqan, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا أَنفَقُوا لَمْ يُسْرِفُوا وَلَمْ يَقْتُرُوا وَكَانَ بَيْنَ ذَلِكَ قَوَامًا. Okay, we're going to translate it as we always do. We'll do like word for word, and then we'll try to put together some sort of meaning that we can translate inshallah ta'ala from it. And then we'll ask some questions about the verse, and some of the opinions regarding it, and then how we can benefit as well inshallah ta'ala. So the first word, it says, وَالَّذِينَ. What does وَالَّذِينَ mean? Aywa, those who. So remember, we're still talking about Ar Rahman. So this is another one. This is وَالَّذِينَ, وَالَّذِينَ, وَالَّذِينَ. Every time it says وَالَّذِينَ. Okay? So وَالَّذِينَ, and the ones who. Very good. إِذَا. Huh? Oh, over there? Yeah, we can fix that inshallah ta'ala. If I fix it now, it'll take too long. So we'll but in the next one, it might be وَالَّذِينَ, and the ones who. إِذَا. What does إِذَا mean? If. Can it mean when? Very good. The difference, it makes a difference, and we'll show how two different mufassirin differed, because one said it means if, one said it means when. Okay? أنفقوا. Aywa, anfaqu. Anfaqu literally means what? Spend. Very good. This doesn't necessarily mean giving, it means spending, right? Which is different. And we'll talk about why that difference means. Anfaqu. Lam. No. It means no. It means not. Yusrifu. Excessive. Too much. So israf is where we go too much. Okay? Or wasteful. Walam. And not again. Yaqturu. What's yaqturu? Aywa, holding back, withholding, stingy, greedy. Very good. So it's the opposite. Wakana. And it was, or he was. Bayna. Between. Half. Dhalika. That. Qawama. Qawm is people, na'am, but qawama means something different. Yeah, so what does الرجال قوامون على النساء? But that's qawwam. Here it's qawama, right? So it's different. What does قوامون أصلا يعني in that verse? الرجال قوامون على النساء. أيوة, no, not necessarily upper hand. يعني that's because بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض, sometimes women have an upper hand over the men. If you want to translate it means you're a provider and protector. You have to protect her. You're in essence in charge. You have what we call the veto power, right? At the end of the day, you have to make a decision. Sustainer, very good. Provider, sustainer, protector, etc. Now, okay. Qawama here, moderate, but also firm. It can mean both, and we'll talk about how it means both inshallah ta'ala. Okay, obviously moderation is here, but also qawama min al-qiyama, and that means standing up, and yaqum. So you're also providing, so you're at least doing something. It doesn't mean that you're not doing anything. Very good. Okay, some questions on the verse. وَالَّذِينَ shows up again. So far it says وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. Then it says وَالَّذِينَ again about قِيَامُ اللَّيْلِ. And then it says وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ. So here number 4. Why is it saying وَالَّذِينَ again? It's a different, it's the same group. but it's a new characteristic. Same group, وَالَّذِينَ, still talking about الَّذِينَ, those same people. So this is another characteristic. So far we've talked about 4 characteristics. I'm not going to quiz you guys on what the 4 are so far. Okay? We'll just start, I know. But this is number 4. So far this is number 4. Number 4 characteristic on this. So it's to emphasize that this is a new point, and this is another characteristic about these special group of people who are Ibadur Rahman. Okay? So we said, إِذَا أَنفَقُوا, does it mean if or when?
When? Yeah, they always do.
So this is one group of Mufassirin, they said, it doesn't, and it's not an if, for them it's always a when, meaning they're always giving, doesn't matter. But for some group, they actually said it means if, and we'll talk about this inshallah ta'ala, and why that's actually a weaker opinion. When we say spending, al-infaq huna, أي infaq, which type of infaq is it? Financially, yes. Okay? Financially. Everybody agrees upon this? There's 3 types of financial giving here that it could be referencing, and many of the Mufassirin have said this. So this is like from Al-Qurtubi, from Ibn al-Jawzi, Ibn Kathir, and we looked at others. Okay? One camp said, al-infaq here is on oneself and one's family. So this is where you spend on yourself and your family. This is what it's meant by the verse. So when we spend, meaning on ourselves and our family, we're taking the middle ground. This is one opinion. Second opinion said it's optional charity. Meaning when they spend in charity, they're also in the middle ground. A third group said, no, it means the obligatory spending. ما هو الفرض. Okay, and it's also in between. Does that make sense? Now there's some questions that we have on all 3 of these categories. Okay, we're going to take category number 1, which is if a person is spending on himself and his family, how can a person be excessive in this type of spending? What does excessive look like? This is a question. More than the requirement. But see, let's say a person is only doing the requirement. Is that okay? On oneself and one's family. It's okay, but what does the ayah say? You're not excessive, but you're also not holding back. So we have to figure out this middle ground, especially when spending on oneself and one's family. Correct? Because there are some wives that would complain, my husband only gives me the bare minimum. Wallahi, one lady came and she says, my husband, he counts dollar for dollar, exactly like he looks at all the bills, he does not give her $1 more than the bills, and she has to pay them. And he asked her, where's the grocery, give me the receipt, and he's giving her exactly what's in the receipt. This is a husband with his wife. He's treating her like, an employee. You go to work and this, wallah, this is true. I wish this was not true. This is true. This happened. Okay? So, and I wish that this is one case. I've heard this same scenario at least 3 times in the past maybe 2 years. The husband is like, what is this? Come on. And then you have the opposite, right? You have the guy where he spends so much that he's in debt. He has credit card debt, he has whatever debt, and it's like, what are you doing, man? You're just, everything you see you spend. And the wife comes and complains. Well, I had a wife, she came and she complained about her husband, my husband spends too much. So, we have wives that complain, my husband doesn't spend anything. The jeans, she said $200. And he bought 4 new ties, because he likes to wear ties. And each tie was at least like $50. It has to be a certain which out of kada. And I'm like, are you serious? And I'm like, you're in debt? He's like, yeah, I am in debt. I'm like, and you're spending on this? He's like, it was nice. Okay, what does that mean? This is too much. Clearly that's too much, right? We agree. There has to be a middle ground. You're not stingy to wear the bare minimum, and you're not obviously spending too much. There's a hadith that only appears in one of the books. This is usually a sign it could be weak, but the meaning is correct. This is why a lot of scholars even say, even this, and this is why Imam Ahmad he narrates it, because the meaning is correct. And he says, "Min fiqh al-rajuli rifqihi fi ma'ishati." Okay, very beautiful meaning. It says from the fiqh, meaning the understanding or the intelligence of the man, is his ease in living. Okay, this means that he's ish and in between. He's not spending too much and he's not withholding too much. I think we can agree upon this. Another hadith that's also narrated in Musnad, Where he says, مَا عَالَ مَنْ اقْتَصَدْ. He will not who is let's say he was living, he's making a certain amount of money, so he measures, he's like, okay, we can afford a certain amount of living. And then he makes a slight raise. His job gives him a raise. This happens in America. What happens automatically? Most Americans, what do? They raise their standard of living. Is this correct? No, it is not. Because you already proved that you could live within a certain standard of living. So if you get a raise, what should you do with that raise? Automatically, you should save it. Or at least spend it for a good cause, yani. There are some people who, when they get when their salary increases, they raise their standard of living. But there was a scholar, I heard a scholar who said, people should instead raise their standard of giving instead of their standard of living. And I like that. We should raise our standard of giving instead of our standard of living, helping other people, etc., and all these types of things. But anyways, that's beyond the point. If we've proved to ourselves that we can live within a certain means, khalas, we should continue doing so. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ is saying this. When people go, they increase their standard of living and they live beyond their means, this is when they'll go poor. Did you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
I want to spend more. But my partner or my family or my wife, she wants to go higher standard, higher good house, good car, and good higher standard.
Yeah.
So what should I do?
That's why you have to convince her that it's good for her. You'd be like, yes, we can raise our standard of living in Jannah. Does that make sense? Okay, you want to buy this nice couch, but let's say this couch will last us 5-10 years. Why not save the money? We'll give it in the sake of Allah, and Allah will give us a better couch in Jannah. Of course, this is why it takes men, الرجال قوامون على النساء. Really, men, you really have to convince her, you have to show her, look, this is why I believe this might be a better thing. Of course, if it's something that's needed, if but if it's something beyond, let's raise our standard in Jannah, inshallah ta'ala. And this, hopefully should be always the case. Okay. The hadith about the best charity, أفضل الصدقات, what does he say? أي وإنفاق الرجل على أهل بيته. It's where the man spends upon his own family. حتى, what does he say? اللقمة يضعها في فم امرأته. Even the luqma, the morsel of food that he puts in the mouth of his wife, his own wife. That's the best form of charity. Okay? So go home, inshallah ta'ala, and feed your wife directly. See what she says. She's like, what are you doing? Why are you? Okay. In reality, just so that you know, measuring stinginess or excessive is case by case. There's no standard. Meaning everybody's standard is different. Somebody's standard of living is different than another person, and everybody knows themselves. Some people, they say, you know what, because I have a certain condition, I have whatever, I spend more in this area, but I spend less in this area. Somebody else, he says, no, I actually have to spend more in this area and less in this area. Everybody within their comfort or their means. Does that make sense? Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, he used to spend more on his food, but less on his clothes. And other people used to criticize him. They said, no, I spend more on my clothes and less on my food. For me, any food suffices. If we're taking some of the Salaf, some of the predecessors, as role models, right? Which we should. But Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, said, no, for me, and in my clothes I could care less. But food, and I enjoy it, I thank Allah for it, etc. This is one area. Does that make sense? Other people, he said, no, for me, my clothes, because I give lectures, I'm in the public eye, I have to look well. But for my food, I can eat anything, it doesn't matter to me. Everybody, according to their own standard of living. Does that make sense? So, but obviously, going excessive in all of these things can be also problematic. And inshallah ta'ala, we'll talk about this. We have a slide dedicated to these types of ideas. This is why also we have to take into consideration the importance of urf and the middle ground. And in Shara', we know that al-urf has its own rulings. So if, for example, and this happens a lot of times in intercultural marriages. So you marry a woman who's used to a certain standard of living. Sah? And then you tell her, no, my culture, I'm going to force my culture on you and you have to live according to, it's going to be very difficult for her. This is why it says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Live with them, hunna, the women, bil-ma'ruf, meaning what is known. and what is known to her as well as you. Not one over the other. So you don't tell her, look, this is how I was raised, this is how I live, khalas, you're going to have to abide by this. Otherwise you'll come into a lot of conflict. Does that make sense? And the opposite is true. If she tries to force and the man has no say, this is conflict. So these things usually have to be dealt with before marriage. And they agree, they talk about it, and then after this we can, inshallah ta'ala, live in harmony. By the way, this is also not even in intercultural relationships. This is even within culture, but they have different standards of living. There's a friend of mine, he married, his wife is from the same village. Not even the same country, same village. Right? But her father is a multi-millionaire, and he's an engineer. He's an engineer, it works. Her father is a multi-millionaire, right? She had a driver, she had a maid, she had a cook, she had people helping in their house. He had nothing, and he couldn't afford those things. So when they got married, was it difficult for her? Yeah, 100%. He expects her to live a middle-class life, and she was used to having her own driver, having a maid, having all these things. It's very difficult, but alhamdulillah, they work it out. Eventually, they work these types of things out. So the man has to realize, if you're getting married or you're entering some sort of relationship like this, that's something to take into consideration. Because I can tell you in the beginning, it was very difficult for both of them, for him and her, their marriage. You know what I mean? It did go through some difficulties, but eventually, people make compromises. طيب. Next slide. We're on the second camp. So remember, camp number 1 said it's spending on yourself and on your family. This is just how much your standard of living. Camp number 2 said, no, it's not that. This is actually about optional charity. Why did they say that it's optional? Obviously, what do we mean by optional charity? We mean sadaqah. Right, not zakah. We're not talking about zakah. We're talking about optional sadaqat, spending on orphans, helping people, etc. Here, they said it's optional because to them, إِذَا means if. If they spend, then this is how they spend. Does that make sense? Because zakah is always obligatory. A zakah would have to be when they spend. When you give zakah, you give, because you always have to give that. So here, they say that camp number 2, just so that you know, is talking about sadaqah, optional charity. Very good. Can a person donate too much in sadaqah?
Up to 1/3.
Okay, very good. 1/3. Where do we get 1/3 from? Do you remember the Sahabi? Does anybody remember the Sahabi? No? No. So Umar and Abu Bakr, how much did they give? They didn't give 1/3. Now? Umar gave half, gave all. طيب. That destroys, it's actually Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. But it's good. Okay, 1/3. But we have half and we have all. So here's the thing. In the case of Sa'd, did the Prophet ﷺ allow him to give more than 1/3? No. But why did he allow Umar to give half and he allowed Abu Bakr to give all? Naam? Very good. So the main difference is Sa'd was sick and he thought that he was dying. And Sa'd said, Ya Rasulullah, I want to give away, I only have this one daughter. This is in the hadith, it's correct hadith. He says, Ya Rasulullah, now at the time Sa'd only had one daughter. By the way, after this, Sa'd had many more children, he had 9 children total. But at the time, he was sick and he only had one daughter, no sons. After this, alhamdulillah, he got sons, he had daughters, etc. But at the time, he was so sick that he thought he was going to die. He was still young. But khalas, he was ready to give up. I'm going to pass away. How much can I give? And the Prophet forbade him from giving more than 1/3. And he said, وَالثُّلُثُ كَثِيرٌ. He said 1/3 is a lot, which means that aslan it's unlawful for a Muslim to give more than 1/3 when they're on their deathbed. Why? And then he tells them why. He says, إِنَّكَ أَن تَذَرَ وَرَثَتَكَ أَغْنِيَاءَ خَيْرٌ لَهُم مِّنْ أَن تَذَرَهُمْ عَالَةً يَتَطَفَّفُونَ النَّاسِ. Okay? He says it's better for you to leave your inheritors wealthy and well off, and they're able to take care of themselves, better than to leave them poor and then now they have to beg other people for help. Which one? No, you want to leave your children with something. He says, I only have this one daughter. He says, doesn't matter. And then the Prophet ﷺ indicates to him, he says, Ya Sa'd, maybe Allah will not cause you to die. And maybe some people will benefit from your life and some people will be harmed from your life. And in fact, this was the case. Sa'd eventually lived to eventually also increased the amount. He married more, he had more children, and he became the leader of the armies that conquered the Persian Empire. He led the battle of Qadisiyah, the battle of Madain, Fath al-Madain. He did a lot of these other things. Helped spread Islam. And of course, we said people will benefit. A lot of Muslims benefited from this, and people were harmed. Obviously, the Persians themselves were harmed by his continuance. Sa'd radiallahu anhu eventually lived to be, even during the time of fitna, during the war that happened between the Sahaba, and he was in that third group of Sahaba that we don't talk about that much, that abstained from fighting. Sa'd radiallahu anhu did not participate, neither on this side or on this side. Right? Even though he knew both, he was related to both, they tried to come to him. Even one of his sons, he came to Sa'd and he said, "Oh my father, we need you to help. At least," and he's like, I don't want anything to do with this, leave me alone. You know where Sa'd was? He was in the mountains by himself with a herd of sheep. By himself. And then he tells his son, he says, "I remember hearing from the Prophet ﷺ that there will come a time when the best thing that a person can do is live in the mountains by himself with a herd of sheep to keep him sustained." SubhanAllah. And he applied it. Which is scary. Sometimes we think about ourselves and what we're doing now in this life. Sometimes I think maybe that might be better. Just live somewhere far away from all the fitna and just have some sheep and you live off of it. But anyways, that's a different case. Sa'd radiallahu anhu did that. And so he's in that third category of Sahaba that had made their own ijtihad, and maybe, of course we know that Allah will reward them inshallah ta'ala for their ijtihad as well. Okay? There's also a case of Mu'adh ibn Jabal. He gave a lot of his wealth, in fact, and other Sahaba who used to give too much of their wealth. Abu Bakr, of course, and Umar giving all of their wealth in half. On the opposite side, can a person be stingy with optional charity? Yes? ها أنتم هؤلاء تدعون لتنفقوا في سبيل الله فمنكم من يبخل ومن يبخل فإنما يبخل عن نفسه والله الغني وأنتم الفقراء. Okay? وإن تتولوا يستبدل قوما غيركم ثم لا يكونوا أمثالكم. Man, these are severe verses. The end of this surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells the believers, here you are, you're being invited to give for the sake of Allah. Some of you will be stingy. And whoever is stingy, he's in fact stingy from his own self. Because when you give, in reality, all you're doing is depositing to your account in the hereafter. So aslan will come back to you anyways, if you truly believe. So in reality, when you're withholding, you withhold from yourself. Especially when it comes to optional charity. This is why he says, and then if you turn away, so eventually that stinginess can lead a person to turn away from everything, from all good. وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا, if you turn away, يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ, Allah will replace you with other people. ثُمَّ لَا يَكُونُوا أَمْثَالَكُمْ, and then they will not be like you. Meaning they will be generous, they will be giving, they will be supporting Islam, supporting the causes, etc. So can a person be stingy? Yes, they can. Even though technically it's optional, but a person can be stingy. And this is why anytime we're called to give, we should at least give something. To not be stingy completely and not be giving too much to where we harm ourselves. Because some Sahaba, there was a Sahabi who gave so much that he eventually declared bankruptcy. حُجِرَ عَلَى مَالِهِ. They had to come in and they had to take all of his wealth because he was giving so much that he used to actually take a dain, a qard, he used to take a loan and then give it away in charity. And he says, "Khalas, since Allah will replace the charity 10 times, I'll be able to pay back the loan." But then he wasn't able to pay back the loan. He said, "What's going on?" And then the Prophet clarified to him, "No, this is not how it works. You don't take a loan to give charity. You take a loan because you need it. You yourself need charity. And the loan is the brother of charity. If you have money, yes, you can give from that, right? If you owe money, you have to pay that off as well. Okay? We have the case of Sa'd radiallahu anhu, and the Prophet said a third. وَالثُّلُثُ كَثِيرٌ. And this is why Abdullah ibn Abbas and others said, in reality, what the Prophet allowed him to give was a fourth. And that third is actually too much. And this is why many fuqaha say that if a person is on their deathbed, they can actually give a fourth. To غَيْرِ الْوَرَثَةِ, to people that are not out of their direct inheritors, to other people, etc. Fourth or a third. Many fuqaha say a third, but Abdullah ibn Abbas, he preferred a fourth. Okay? What's the middle ground in giving charity? Give, but not too much, to where you harm yourself. Okay? Meaning you don't want to harm yourself in this life, and you don't want to harm yourself in the hereafter. I like this, because when you withhold, you're harming yourself in the hereafter. Give so that you have something in the hereafter, but don't give so much that you're harming yourself in the dunya. Because here's the thing, there was one person who had this theory, saying if I want to be altruistic, truly giving, I should give everything that I have. But if you have no way to replace that, now you yourself are poor and you need somebody to give you. So you always want to give in a way where you can maintain the fact that you can still give. Not so much to where you harm yourself and then you're not able to give anymore. Does that make sense? You still want to be generating some sort of wealth and income, but in a way where you can give. We have the third camp. Remember they said it's the obligatory giving, which means zakah and anything that's due. Do anything that's due, and everything that's an obligation upon you. So if you're married, it's obligated upon you to spend upon your wife. If you're a father, it's obligated upon you to spend on your children. If you owe a debt, it's obligatory upon you to pay off that debt. The responsibilities. Al-fard, al-furud min al-nafaqa. These people took idha to mean when. Meaning when they give in such a way. So, how can we spend excessively in this category? What does spending excessively look like in this category? They said spending excessively is where you're spending your wealth on things that are outside of your obligations and outside of the halal. Meaning I'm spending my money in what? In haram. So al-israf, this camp, they took al-israf to mean spending on anything haram is israf, it's excessive, it's wasteful. But if you're spending on halal and you're doing what's obligatory, you're fine. Does that make sense? Because here's the thing, if I pay off a debt, is that ever excessive? Like let's say I owe somebody $500. If I pay $500 at once, would anybody tell me that's excessive, that's israf? No, because I owe every single penny.